Jen, and I will be your Oomf host. This week, Oomf people will call anime weird, but then watch 27-year-olds play high schoolers on Netflix.
Yeah, that's
So true.
So this week we're riding the Noughties nostalgia train because it seems to be everywhere at the moment. 2000 to 2009 is the Noughties. It's a hazy period, I think, where celebrity culture seemed to rule, and MTV had us all wanting our rides pimped. If you remember that show. So, intros round. This week we're going to start oldest, sorry Jess, to youngest, and we are each going to say how old we were in this period. Jess, starting with you.
Yeah, okay. So in the new year of 2000, I was 13. So I had just become a teenager a couple of months before. And by the end of the decade, I was 23.
I was not as mathematically accurate as Jess has been. I started school in the year 2000, so I would have been roughly about 11. And then by the end of that period, I would have been about 21. So yeah, I also grew up in the noughties.
Yeah, again, I wasn't as mathematically accurate as Jess either. I don't like numbers. So from the periods 2000 to 2009, I was the ages of 7 to 16.
It me. I'm baby. So from the year 2000, I was 5 and quickly turned 6. And then in 2009, I was either 15 or 16. I don't know how to maths, but yeah. I must have been 15 because I finished secondary school in 2010.
Okay, so the thing that kicked off deciding that we should have a look at the noughties is the way that it is very popular at the moment. Lots of musical artists are covering songs from that period. There is a general nostalgia for the fashion.
Why though?
I have no idea. So I thought it might be a good idea to kind of look at how we remember that time period as people who lived through it in comparison to kind of the nostalgia for it, because I think it's different living through a period of low-rise jeans.
I'm triggered. I am triggered, Jen.
They really were awful.
Honestly, my prevailing memory of the noughties was just trash. All of the Zoomers who were born in the noughties, having nostalgia for it, were too young to remember just how crap it was.
Yep.
We're talking Big Brother, George Galloway pretending to be a cat on Celebrity Big Brother, drinking milk out of, and then walking past tabloid newspapers like at train stations with like photos of it on the front page. And every week there'd be something like that on the front page. Also, newspapers still existing.
Yeah, that's true. That was novel. I think the big thing with the 2000 to 2009 period, the just very deep kind of celebrity culture. Gen X like to call themselves the like MTV generation because they were the first ones to have like MTV music videos and stuff. But I think equally, those of us that grew up in this period are kind of also a sort of a MTV generation, but in a reality TV sense more than a music video.
Yeah.
MTV at that point stopped being a music channel and started being a reality TV channel.
You had stuff like The Hills, basically just rich white people being rich and white. It was an American version of like Made in Chelsea.
The precursor to things like Real Housewives, I think.
Yeah, you had things like Newlyweds Nick and Jess that followed Nick Lachey and Jessica Simpson.
Yep.
Laguna Beach, which was another Hills type
show. Oh my God, yeah.
And then you had the true classics that really stick in my mind as things that would just not be made anymore. Things like Room Raiders, where they would take a blue light into teenage boys' bedrooms to see what stains were left on their bed sheets.
Oh, disgusting.
Why would you unearth that from my memory, Jen? Why would you do that to me?
I'm really grateful that I was so sheltered as a young teen.
As we were planning this podcast, Mimi and I were talking about the fact that we were kind of left in front of the TV and just allowed to watch MTV. There was also the show Date My Mom.
Oh my God.
Which is exactly what it sounds like. Essentially, your potential suitors had to go on a date with your mom and she picked one for you. That was...
The straights have gone too far.
There was also My Super Sweet 16, which was
Yeah.
just spoiled brats having.
I used to love watching that.
I used to watch that occasionally at friends' houses and like be like, oh, I'm gonna have such a cool 16th birthday party, and then my 16th birthday party was basically just us hanging out in the park eating Jaffa cakes.
Also, the iconic Pimp My Ride.
Yeah.
Which was quite entertaining, but yeah.
If you know the memes about the TV program Extreme Makeover, the house one, if you liked, I don't know, beaches, then they'd turn your bedroom into the ocean. It was like that, but for cars, essentially. Yeah. If you even vaguely mentioned that you liked something, then they would theme the whole car around that thing. And it was absolutely awful.
I was gonna say, the UK version was not as bad as the US version. The US version was on drugs. That's the only way I can describe it.
Yeah,
the US version was like to the nth degree. I was like, half of these modifications that they use make no sense. They have no utility. What is the purpose of this?
Yeah. I've got to say, like, I missed out on a lot of MTV stuff because I had limited TV time because my parents are quite strict, and we only had the like 4 main channels. We didn't have a Freeview box, so we basically had 4 TV channels. So the reality telly that I remember was like British crap reality telly, so like Super Nanny, Wife Swap. Like you could not make them today because they were just so intrusive and terrible to people's lives. Like Wife Swap, what were they doing? Why? Ew, no.
Dreadful. That is trash in its purest form.
Absolutely disgusting.
Really was.
And the Noughties was just rife with trash TV. I mean, it still is to this day, but the Noughties was the birthplace of trash reality TV. Like the Osbournes, that was actually really entertaining. I did actually enjoy that at the time.
I quite liked that actually at the time.
It did set the blueprint then for the Kardashians, rich families, but yeah.
Also, even outside of MTV stuff, you had things like the Paris and Nicole, whatever that one was called.
Oh yeah, that one.
Simple Life,
Something
where they
like
basically cosplayed being poor.
Yeah, that was messed up.
Yeah, one MTV show that I did like, and I actually went to see the new film of it this week, was Jackass.
Jackass was excellent.
That was so good. And what I liked about Jackass was that it was kind of pioneering in the sense that it was TV that being made by young people for young people. Like it was just a bunch of idiots in America with their own home videos, and they were just filming stupid stunts.
Jackass was kind of restrained compared to the Welsh version that MTV also had,
Dirty Sanchez.
Dirty Sanchez, which was basically just a bunch of frankly insane men doing things like rolling around in stinging nettles in the nude.
But Jackass was just kind of funny and puerile and stupid, and to me it was kind of a prototype YouTube. Like if they'd been around 10 years later, they would have been massive YouTube stars.
Along those lines as well, I don't know if you guys remember Punk'd.
Oh my god, yeah.
That was MTV as well.
Yeah,
that ran for so many years though. I didn't realise.
It was really funny though because Ashton Kutcher was the host, right? Initially. And basically that's where he got his jump off anyway. But it was really funny because it was Ashton Kutcher, but he would only host it when it was big celebrities. Otherwise they just had like some random host. If they were like B-list celebrities or anything, Ashton Kutcher wouldn't show up.
Wow.
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
There was a whole movement of MTV shows back then that was kind of
prank shows.
Pranking,
Yeah. Going back to UK shows, which were like the only things I watched a lot of in the noughties, Skins, which there's been a lot of talk about recently, probably because Euphoria is really on trend at the moment, and there's a lot of people that are like, oh, Euphoria is nothing compared to Skins, or like people being mind boggled that it's been what, like 10 years 15 years. There
it
we
launched
go.
Like Dev Patel's career, so it's been a very long time. So
and Daniel Kaluuya.
Daniel Kaluuya. And what was that other guy's name? Nicholas Hoult.
Nicholas Hoult.
He was,
yeah,
loads of really big name actors came out of that, but they were like actually the ages of their characters, which was really unusual. And it caused absolute public outcry because people were like, oh, teenagers doing things, how dare they? We'd be like watching Channel 4 and a trailer would come on for it, and my parents would literally change the channel because they're like, oh, we don't want you getting any ideas. Like, Mum, I don't have any friends.
Oh.
Also, Skims was actually wildly depressing compared to the kind of glossy, shiny American stuff. Like, even when illegal substances were mentioned on American shows, it was still kind of glossy and shiny and glamorous. Whereas on Skims, it was just absolutely bleak. Like,
it was so grim. And I don't know, it's very gritty and in some ways true to life and in other ways a bit exaggerated.
I mean, having said that, Skims, I think, launched a whole different type of shows, like in the UK, because I don't think I ever watched Skims, but I did watch Misfits, which I feel like
I love Misfits.
In the same vein.
Misfits was really good.
So good.
It's interesting how, like you were just saying, that Skims and all those were kind of super grim and bleak. But on the flip side, in the US, everything was becoming even cleaner, because I don't know if you remember, like, I think there were the Jonas Brothers and maybe some others that were like promoting abstinence, and they were and they had like promise rings, purity rings and things like that. There was a very strange culture at that time of being super duper like squeaky clean.
It's when a lot of the like Disney Channel stuff was kind of in its heyday, and some of the Disney stars were like aging out of being child stars, and they were kind of like, what do we do with these kids? Do we have them continue having their squeaky clean I'm a child star image, but how do we age that up?
And that was kind of their answer to it, which was very strange, very unrealistic. It was more what adults wanted teens to be rather than what teens were actually doing.
My main memories around that kind of period have a lot to do with the sort of pervasiveness of celebrity culture. It's hard to explain unless you lived through it, but 2000s, that period saw the birth of what is now mega popular reality TV shows, those types of things. Most of them got their beginnings in that period. There was more of a taste for celebrities, especially humiliating celebrity culture. Stuff like TMZ and Perez Hilton were extremely popular, and they were all centered around this kind of idea of essentially humiliating celebrities, taking photos of them in compromising positions.
Every single tabloid newspaper and like trashy sort of celeb gossip stuff was all like, oh, look at this picture of Paris Hilton falling out of a nightclub, look at this picture of a boy band member, you know, in the back of a car really drunk, look at Michael Jackson dangling his baby off a balcony for some reason.
Oh God.
And there was this kind of public appetite for it where people cared about it and were very hungry for it, even if they weren't necessarily a fan of the people it was about. It was more about like, oh, isn't it interesting seeing all this stuff?
I think crueler is probably the word.
Crueler, I think so,
absolutely.
I don't know if part of it is also about like the culture that was surrounding sort of like the celebrity culture back then as well, in the early 2000s. That whole lawsuit between Catherine Zeta-Jones and OK Magazine, it was because of her wedding pictures that they'd put in her magazine, and she had like a exclusive contract with Hello Magazine. And I just remember thinking it was really strange, but I think part of it went into the celebrity culture in that half these celebrities knew what they were getting into with that kind of culture as well. Like, obviously it was a bit terrible, and all these paparazzis following everybody, hounding everybody, and that whole culture was pretty pervasive. But then I think part of it was also like they fed into it, because they definitely knew where paparazzi would be for sure, and things like that. And I mean, so like that whole thing, I think it was like a bit of a cyclical cycle, but it was just a bit weird that that was what we sort of accepted.
I think what's missed out in a lot of the nostalgia is how deeply unpleasant a lot of it was. Like a lot of it was really nasty, just very intrusive, incredibly sexist. It was a lot of like massive sexualization without consent of female celebrities. Most, probably over half of the paparazzi pictures and things that were put in the media would these days be considered to be sexual harassment. Because
and a lot of these were like celebrities who were young, like young females.
I mean, just look at Britney Spears. I mean, it's coming out now. Like there's been documentaries documentaries more recently about how horrific she was treated by the paparazzi, the press, just the media in general in the 2000s when she was still a young person. She was only in her 20s, and how like Justin Timberlake basically got a free ride with anything that he said and did about her, and she was just getting absolutely vilified and getting her whole life just put out there on the front pages. And at the time, people just didn't think anything of it. They wanted more of it.
There was absolutely no awareness whatsoever of mental health, like none at all. No. And I remember that from growing up in the noughties, being a kid and being a teenager. Nobody gave a crap.
No.
And nobody considered, if we're chasing around this young woman who doesn't have a whole lot of reliable family and friend connections, who's been thrust into the spotlight from a very young age, how's that going to affect her mental health, I wonder? No, nobody cared. Just absolutely been put through the ringer and then vilified. And then when they finally sort of had moments where they wanted to take back control of their lives, or they wanted to demonstrate sort of how stressful or unpleasant it was to be going through this, they were instantly called crazy, or, she's having a breakdown. She needs to go to rehab. And even that was kind of like, God, the American public loves an Icarus narrative. They absolutely love this person got too famous and they couldn't take the heat. And now they're having this downfall. And we're going to document all of that in grisly detail too.
The Daily Mail under Piers Morgan was around that time as well. They were notoriously terrible for it. So with The Sun, just intrusive, really kicking people while they were down kind of mindset.
And it still happens.
Was the phone hacking scandal in the noughties?
I think it was.
It came out in 2011. But everything that it was about happened during the 2000s.
I particularly remember like British female celebs going to Spain or something, renting a private villa, and there being paparazzi with telephoto lenses like peering over their garden walls trying to get a topless photo of them, and they'd sell it to the highest bidder, and then absolutely, and everyone was just like, look at her tits. Like nobody considered how awful that was.
This is sort of, it's not pre-internet because the internet was a thing and it was around, but it is kind of pre how the internet is now. Celebrities can do their own humiliating now by tweeting random stuff that they inevitably don't need and then take back. Whereas in that period, that wasn't really a thing. So I think celebrities were both more removed from us. You didn't see their daily lives as much. But because of that, there was more of a hankering for these sort of paparazzi photos and all of that kind of stuff. And print media was such a big thing in that time as well. You know, now you still have like Heat magazine and stuff, but in that period, there were so many of those types of magazines. And there was ones that were directly aimed at teenagers. You had like teen versions of things.
Sugar.
And also things like Cosmo Teen, which was like Cosmopolitan but for teenagers.
Teen Vogue.
And Teen Vogue.
Because obviously now we've got direct access to celebrities themselves. Like if they have a Twitter page, you can at them, got their own Instagram. There are various social media platforms where you can interact with them directly. Back then, obviously, the only way you could really interact with them was like through TV shows or through print media. And I think that really brought about that whole other sort of status to celebrities, where it was like you couldn't access them directly the way you could like your friends and family. And I feel like that whole culture has sort of bled through even now, even though we do have direct access to them. Like people still see them as slightly as other or above, rather than just seeing them as regular people doing their jobs, who basically their jobs is to cater to a lot of people through media.
I don't know, I have a lot of thoughts on this. The noughties were a time when the internet was in its early days, such that like photos could be distributed, but most people didn't have a camera phone. Like I remember getting a camera phone for the first time and being like, look, it's a camera phone, guys. It's a phone with a camera on it, and now everyone's just like, it's a phone.
And even then, it was potato quality.
They were terrible. So celebs weren't at the point where they were like live tweeting their location at all times, and it wasn't like if you bumped into John Cena in Starbucks, you could take a photo of him. You just have to be like, oh wow, hey guys, I met John Cena in Starbucks the other day.
One thing I would blame all of this on, and this isn't celebrities, but I think it's part of the public surface, sort of people's Grandma's Dirty Laundry is like American daytime TV shows. So like Jerry Springer, and people just want to know that their lives are better than the people that they're looking at on TV. Yeah, I think that bleeds into celebrity culture as well, of like, oh, it's not all great, is it?
I definitely think that is a thing with the reason that people like to, it's not something I've ever personally enjoyed, watching celebrities fail. Because of the rise of stuff like YouTube, you can control that for yourself now. But then it was more people getting on programs like Big Brother and stuff like that. To a certain extent, stuff like Come Dine With Me. So you could be on those programs and then become a minor celebrity. Sad little life, Jane.
Sad little life, Jane.
Become a minor celebrity, have your like 5 minutes of fame, and if you were lucky, you just disappear. I don't know anything about Love Island twats because I don't want to know anything about Love Island twats. Whereas then I feel like things like Big Brother and stuff like that were such just part of the cultural zeitgeist.
It was very
you knew about these people whether you wanted to or not. Whereas now it's much more pick and choose. If you don't want to know about that, then you won't know about that. Like,
it was hard to curate what you were consuming because there was some choice, but there were certain things that were just, everyone's watching it. There were shows that everyone was watching. There were like catchphrases from the shows. Things like Friends, you couldn't escape them. Everyone was watching Friends.
Because there was like less choice, I guess things were much more like, I guess the term is water cooler moments. There were things that everybody was talking about the next day at work or at school or whatever.
There was no catch-up TV or anything. Like if you wanted to see something, you had to watch it live. And like back then, the only media that we consumed was sort of British and American. Like that's the only thing that was given to us.
Having said that, my noughties, I mean, whilst I did consume the US and the UK media that was there, it was quite prevalent. I did, by the time I hit 12 or something, I had more of a direct access to the internet. So obviously everybody knows that I'm a weeb. So that was sort of when I was watching like my animes and stuff. So I really got into like Japanese animes during that time. And so most of my shift and a lot of my nostalgia goes towards all these early 2000s animes or even like early 90s animes that were being uploaded online at that time, which I would watch. And I actually watched a lot of like more than British or American TV shows. I watched more like Japanese TV shows as well. I think it really does depend on like what media you were consuming at that period.
Definitely. Yeah, you were a pioneer in that sense because like that was not the mainstream at the time. It's much more accessible now, find things like that. But at the time, like if it wasn't in front of you, you didn't know to look for it.
But to be fair, right, like I did actually, a lot of my anime and weeb stuff actually did come from TV as well, because I remember Fox Kids, I don't know if anybody remembers that, but like Fox Kids after dark, so like after 6 p.m, what they used to do was they would put on like animes. These were like animes that they would not like show now because of the content that they would show. Like it was very serious stuff, but like all these old animes that I used to watch on Fox Kids after dark because I was left unsupervised with the TV at a young age. So really I was watching stuff I shouldn't have. But that's where I got my intro into weebness, was actually through TV as well at that point.
Yeah, fair enough. I think I'm too old. I wasn't around. I wasn't a kid at that time, so I didn't watch.
I do remember reading mangas though, so I was definitely a flavour of weeb. Yeah, no, it was a good time. In some ways, I'm quite glad I was engaging with that side of pop culture and less with some of the other pop culture.
Yeah, I think the 2000s was the start of the branching out of just consuming Western media. In the 2000s, there was more non-English language films that were becoming popular. There was Amelie, Pan's Labyrinth, City of God, and Spirited Away as well, which
Spirited
was
Away.
huge at the time.
Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon was around that time as well.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was, wasn't it?
That sort of bled into Western media as well, because then that's when they started releasing movies like Rush Hour and stuff, which I love.
Rush Hour is iconic.
I have distinct memories around that time of watching horror movies that were wildly inappropriate for somebody of my age to be watching. From about the age of 12 or 13 onwards, just watching stuff like Silent Hill and Saw. You go around a friend's house and be like, oh yeah, we're watching a funny movie to your parents, and then you get there and it's like, we're watching Saw 2, everyone.
part of the thing that made that such a strange time to grow up in is that really it was the birth of a lot of things, internet and fan culture, and that kind of tailoring your interest, those types of things, because you still had the reason that stuff like MTV could have such a grip. It was because you still had like not that many channels to choose from on the TV, certainly not as many as you have now.
No.
And you kind of had no choice but to consume things because it was just in the zeitgeist. It was like what people talked about to a certain extent. It was strange.
I just want to say, having said that, right, it wasn't all terrible. I don't want people listening to this thinking, oh my God, the early 2000s, which is such a terrible time for everybody.
No.
Like, it was, but there were some good things about it as well, you know.
Definitely.
I'm just a bit cognizant of the fact that we're talking about all these things that we hated. I was like, wait, we did enjoy some things, guys.
I feel like the noughties were just cursed. Like the ultimate cursed content. We're talking like low-rise jeans.
Unironically
low-rise jeans.
Literally the fashion was to show your thong.
The fashion was disgusting. The frosted tips, no, in the bin. The weird thing where you would wear like a long sleeved shirt and then a t-shirt over what was with the layering that went on in the noughties? Long sleeve shirt with a t-shirt over it.
We layered things terribly in like the noughties.
The skirts over some jeans thing.
Yeah.
That was the thing.
And then don't forget the fairy Ugg boots.
Oh yeah.
Those were so ugly.
Yeah.
We're dangerously close to talking about like, were you a Jane Norman PE kit bag or a JD Sports PE kit bag person?
Oh, God. It was not a good time to be a fat kid. I will say that. Thinness was the goal. It's time for today's sponsor. We are sponsored by Kelly Rowland messaging Nelly on an Excel spreadsheet and then getting very mad that he didn't respond.
From the music video, guys. The music video dilemma.
The timestamp is at 3 minutes 12. Thank you, Mimi. If you would like to see that iconic moment.
Did I rewatch the video to get the timestamp? Maybe. Who knows?
And when I say she got mad, she did. She threw that phone down.
She did. It was also one of those like weird like sliding sideways.
Yeah, it was a side kick.
Why? Weird
so many
phone
questions.
designs.
I do miss the flip phones though.
I
like
do.
The fun times, like when you had an angry phone call and then you'd flip it shut.
Yeah.
Like it's not the same anymore. Where's the drama?
Moving on to like less of us moaning about how crap the noughties were, because they were quite crap in some ways. In other ways, it was really an era of a lot of technological advances, like gaming, and how that had a real golden age in the noughties.
Definitely, yeah. Like the Xbox came out, I think it was 2000, 2001. And one of the games that came out then was Halo. And that was a huge game changer. Like the graphics and the storytelling. It was just, it was massive at the time. And then it was like the start of more like online gaming and LAN gaming, which is local area network. It was massive.
I remember Kingdom Hearts, the first one, came out in the early 2000s. I loved that game. Like
that was so good.
It was everywhere. Kingdom Hearts was such a peak nostalgia trip.
I was big into Final Fantasy.
Oh yes.
To the point where I had a Game Boy Advance XP, which was like the flip one, and I played, there was Final Fantasy Tactics, I think, which was like quite different to the ones you played on PC. It was much more like turn-based game, and all the characters were like cute little chibis. It was great.
What also came out in the 2000s, or in 2000, was The Sims.
Yes.
Oh my God. I played
God.
a lot of The Sims, and I continue to play a lot of The Sims.
Same.
It is an addiction.
My best friend, when I was about 7, I would go around her house and play The Sims. I didn't usually like badger my parents to get me things very often, but because we had a PC and because The Sims was like £15 or something, I begged them for it, and they finally gave in and got it for me. And I would spend I would spend my whole computer hour of the day that I was allowed playing Sims.
I remember I used to play The Sims between coming home from school and 6 o'clock, broke because I wasn't allowed on the internet until after 6, because then it was the evening rate and it was cheaper to go on the internet. So I used to fill that gap.
The thing is, now I think about it, we used to, I don't know if little kids do this anymore because everyone's got an iPad or whatever. I used to like go to my friend's house and we would play The Sims. So we'd just take it in turns.
Yeah, we do that. I remember doing that.
The Sims. So I'd just sit next to my friend, watching her play The Sims. And then she'd watch me play The Sims.
I was such a nerd, and this is just one of my confessions now. I used to like go into the game file and extract the audio so that I could listen to like the music in The Sims. I'm like,
no, but the first Sims games had a really solid soundtrack.
The elevator music, like chill, like stick that on your iPod Nano and you're good to go, mate.
Yeah.
We'll have to put a poll on our Twitter whether people want us to do a whole episode on The Sims, because I feel like we could.
The Sims and like gaming in general is something I really want to talk about more, because it's
gaming.
Like so good. There was definitely like a rise in indie gaming as technology allowed more people to be developing games and like small indie design studios to get bigger and like launch more to the general public.
Yeah, definitely. One thing that we used to do as a family is my dad used to play Resident Evil and Silent Hill on an evening, and we'd all gather around in the living room on the sofa and just watch him like play the Resident Evil game.
Wholesome family fun.
Wholesome family fun, just watching Silent Hill with a guy with acid falling out of his face. Yeah, we did that, but with Tomb Raider. We did that with like more wholesome games with my dad.
You used to be able to buy game guides from from PC World and stuff. Like I remember we used to have those, and then we'd like help Dad through the different levels of Tomb Raider.
Oh my god!
Their like game guide.
In the early days of the internet, finding pirated versions of those that people had scanned in and uploaded to their website that you could download like one page at a time as images.
Cheat codes.
Rosebud. Oh my god, Age of Empires. I was obsessed with Age of Empires and Age of Mythology. Age of Empires, there was a cheat code called Canada Bear. Don't ask me how I know this, but if you typed in Canada Bear as one of your cheat codes, a bear wearing a Canadian flag as a cape would spawn and you could ride it around like a horse.
I'm sitting in my brother's bedroom recording this, and I'm looking at his classic games that he's got on a shelf. And there's like Metal Gear Solid on the original PlayStation, Rainbow Six, GTA 2, the Die Hard trilogy. Okay.
Oh,
fair enough.
I don't remember that. And then there's a whole bunch of original Xbox games like Ghost Recon. Yeah, he's basically got all of the Tom Clancy Xbox games up there.
Yeah. Metal Gear Solid.
Snake.
To be fair, I remember because I used to hate watching him play video games because he enjoyed quite like shoot 'em up style games, and I didn't really enjoy watching those.
Yeah, gaming was huge for me when I was at school.
Yeah, as a like older teenager when I was at 15, 16, so towards the end of the noughties, like a lot of people's parties and like hanging out at people's houses was like listen to metal, watch some absolutely horrendous horror movie, and then play like Silent Hill or something, and everyone would just be pissing themselves by the end of it. It was a time.
It was a time. Well, we did that as a family, not the party stuff.
I'm glad to know that you weren't off your tits on Ket with your dad, because that's quite concerning.
Asking my dad to stamp on people's heads. Yeah. Destroy the brain.
Having said that though, I feel like the soundtracks for all these games were like in a peak era. Like I definitely remember like setting like soundtracks to some games as like my ringtone for my phone. You know, the ones that you'd have to key in yourselves. You're like, this is the key for that ringtone, and then you'd set that as your ringtone.
The Nintendo music, like Mario music, Mario Kart music.
There's a reason
Sports
why YouTube people and TikTok people are still using the Wii music as their background sounds. It is that good. It's iconic.
The Wii shopping channel music is it's my anthem. I love it so much.
I have distinct memories of when
Jess's national anthem. She stands and pledges allegiance to it.
Yeah.
When the Wii was first launched, I remember going to friends' houses and there being some Wiimote accidents My friend accidentally chucked a Wiimote out the window once. One time they forced me to play that. We didn't have enough controllers, so I had to play Mario Kart with nunchucks, and it did not go well.
But gaming technology was evolving a lot at that time, and there was a lot of gimmicky stuff. Like, I don't know if any of you guys know the PlayStation iToy, which was like a little camera that you put on top of your TV, and you could play iToy games, like motion sensor games. So you have to like put your arms into like
I quite liked like going around to different friends' houses. Every friend would have a different console, so you get to play like different console, different games, different weird new technology.
Yeah, very gimmicky, but they were great fun.
There was also like just bizarre Nokia phones coming out, like
really weird.
a thing called the N-Gage, which was basically like a gaming phone. You could use it as a phone, but then it also had games. But Nokia in particular, I remember, had just some weird phones that came out in the 2000s.
Do you know what else? I'm going to slightly nudge us onto a different topic here. The iPod launched in 2001. I've still got mine.
I still have an iPod as well.
I've still got, I had a mini.
Same. I think I had a nano, but it was the square nanos, not the clip ones, just the square ones. I had it in black, I remember.
I think if you are younger and you don't remember a time before having easy access to music, like on your phone or what have you, it was just amazing to be a teenager and to be able to carry around in your pocket the music that you liked, because essentially they were like a hard drive, like
it was kind of like a more of a USB stick size, really, because like I had a first generation shuffle, which is probably worth money at this point. It basically just looks like a vape with buttons on it. It didn't even have a screen. It had a 1 gigabyte memory, which is nothing compared to a USB stick. You can get a 16 gigabyte memory stick for like £5 these days.
But at the time that was huge.
The one that I still have now, I remember I saved up a long time to buy, because I was a little bit of an indie swear word. And so I saved up and I bought myself, it's a brick, like it is a brick. It was like 120 gigabyte, I want to say.
Oh,
wow. That's huge.
Was that one of the like iPod Touches?
No, it's still got a annoying wheel.
So just like the classic iPod.
But it's a brick. Like when you start it up, you can hear the mechanism inside of it working. Like
I think I still have mine in my house somewhere. I also have an unbranded, like cheap MP3 player which still works and which I still take with me when I'm traveling. The 2000s and the noughties were, in my view, a golden age for music. We were just looking at the NME article, the 100 best songs of the noughties, and if you completely ignore all the writing in the article, which is absolute bull poop,
painfully enemy,
but the actual songs themselves that they've picked are pretty damn good, including number 1, which is Crazy in Love by Beyonce, because it's a banger.
It's iconic. It defined the noughties.
I would also say that Sound of the Underground did as well, because that's also a banger.
Crazy in Love really was everywhere.
It really was everywhere. And also like Can't Get You Out of My Head.
Oh, Kylie. Yeah, Kylie, everywhere.
Can't Get You Out of My Head. That was really like
her outfit and everything was just iconic, isn't it?
And of course Britney, Toxic. A lot of Britney, really.
It really was a great time for hip-hop songs, because we were just coming off the 90s after the whole Tupac Biggie conflict, and it was sort of like a golden age. Like I remember starting off like the early 2000s, it was Jay-Z's album, I think it was Hova, or Izzo, whichever one you want to call it. And then Jay-Z, I think he launched another album after that as well. Kanye West also released College Dropout in like early to late 2000s, I'd say. But obviously Beyonce's Crazy in Love, which was obviously spanned the era. Rihanna also debuted in the 2000s as well. Then there was like Outkast, which was more pop, but again, they told the line. And Eminem as well, in terms of like rap. A lot of his songs came out then too. And I mean, whatever your opinions of Eminem were, like his songs really were everywhere at that point.
And also his music videos were iconic. Like, I don't know how he got away with them, but they were ridiculous.
Yeah, very political.
But to be fair, he didn't really get away with them. A lot of people did complain about it.
No, I mean, people did come for him for it.
Shout out to my favorite, the most iconic, Missy Elliott. Like all her songs in the 2000s were iconic. And if you haven't seen a Missy Elliott music video, any music video you can find, anyone, you can't go wrong. Yeah, Get Your Freak On was iconic.
It's so good. She's just an icon, a legend. We stand for eternity. I love her so much.
A good link to this is the fact that the 2000s were also the height of music piracy.
Now
you very much take it for granted. You had to download like song by song, keep your fingers crossed that you actually got the song and you didn't get somebody's bedroom remix.
2 girls, 1 cup.
Oh no.
Oh God, why would you bring that up? Or you'd get Rickrolled, which was another classic.
You'd get Rickrolled. You'd get the song, but then every 20 seconds it would be interspersed with some guy yelling his DJ name.
Yes, I have so many of those on my iPod still because I couldn't find a clean version of it that didn't have a guy yelling.
DJ Fresh, Jazzy Beats. Man, I remember them shouting their names.
Something that I was really into because I listened to a lot of Radio 1 back in the days when Radio 1 was actually good in the noughties, and it's now not good anymore. Listen to Radio 6 music, that's where it's at. But BBC Radio 1 used to play a lot of actual up-and-coming artists, and in the noughties that was kind of the birth of like grime as a genre, along with, you know, like pop punk and some of the indie artists. Grime was sort of really coming up in the UK, and I remember being a big fan of a lot of British grime artists like Dizzy Rascal. I'd say like Lethal Bizzle as well in some way. Like some of his stuff was great.
I was very much into indie music, and it was a very strong time for that type of stuff. You had stuff like The Killers, Arcade Fire. You also had, like, in terms of like UK rap scene and stuff, you had stuff like The Streets, which their first album still holds up. It is poetry. Mike Skinner was a very clever man.
It's great.
But it was more, I feel like, a lot more diverse. Like now, a lot of Western music is kind of similar sounding.
It follows trends a lot more clearly. Like it's much more like, oh, this year disco is a big thing in pop music and everyone's doing disco. And in the noughties it was just so diverse and so just very different in a lot of ways. Like you had in the top 10 album chart, you'd have like Queens of the Stone Age with massive rock album, you'd have like a metal album, Mr. Brightside by The Killers.
I mean, I've got like a list of top 10 songs of 2003, and even just reading the list, it's different. Like you've got Hey Ya by Outkast, Crazy in Love Beyonce, Seven Nation Army, The White Stripes, Jesus Walks, Kanye West, In the Club, 50 Cent, 99 Problems, Jay-Z, Mr. Brightside, The Killers, Maps, Yeah Yeah Yeahs, Ignition, R. Kelly, Where Is the Love, Black Eyed Peas. And that's just 2003. Like,
it's so diverse, and also a load of bangers.
And going back to the indie stuff, one of the groups that came big in the 2000s was the Arctic Monkeys, and it's interesting that they first got famous through MySpace. That's where their music was first published, and that's where they got a following and then released or got a record deal, which is
interesting because like I can't imagine now anybody getting famous through Facebook. Like
no,
I guess the equivalent now would be
TikTok.
I mean YouTube, wouldn't it? I mean YouTube,
TikTok,
and
probably TikTok. You've
got artists, some independent artists like Dodie and like Troye Sivan have made it big through YouTube, but that kind of happened in the 10s, not in the 20s. And like
Bieber as well.
Bieber.
But I think Arctic Monkeys must be one of, if not the first musical act to have become famous first on the internet without a record label.
When I used to buy the physical NME magazine or like Kerrang,
I used to buy
or the other
Kerrang,
I used to buy physical copies of it because it was like one of the few magazines that my dad would be like, oh, all right, I'll buy it for you. But I remember buying those like physical magazines and there being like interviews with up and coming bands who then got really big, and they'd be like, oh yeah, we don't have any management, we've got a MySpace page, we've got a Bandcamp page.
Well, I mean, again, like we said about earlier, the prevalence of like print media in terms of celebrity culture, but it also was a big thing for music as well. You didn't just have NME, you had like Q magazine, Mojo. They really could like make or break artists, like especially NME. They were tastemakers in terms of like indie music. They've never ever forgotten that and are now pretentious as hell.
But they've lost their power, haven't they, now, because of the internet? People have more free will in terms of what they want to enjoy.
But then also now a lot of our music taste is done for us by algorithms, which is weird to think about.
Simpler times back in the noughties.
Simpler times back in the noughties.
it was unique because it was that period when we had the internet, but it wasn't huge yet.
No.
It was just sort of in that in-between phase.
It was finding its feet, wasn't it? It didn't know what it wanted to be.
And also because of the fact that everybody pirated music, you could try out things. It was the first time that you could try things. You didn't have to buy a whole album and then, oh, I hate this. This is not very good. You could like pick and choose and try new stuff. And it allowed you to diversify your music taste for the first time, really. Like now we take it for granted. If I want to try something out, I can do that. Like apart from it having some annoying Spotify repercussions where it will suggest me that artist forever and ever, whether I liked it or not. You can do it very easily now. You couldn't until music piracy.
God, I remember sitting in HMV at those, you could like test listen to a CD. And I remember like listening to almost a whole CD there, just like putting it back. And when the time ran out, being like, I'm going to listen to this MGMT album over and over again because I'm too poor to buy it this week, but I'll save up my pocket money until I can afford it.
And it wasn't just, a good time for listeners to be able to discover new music, but it was a good time for artists to be able to have their music listened to. Because you didn't have to sign to a record label or get a gig or anything like that. You could just record it in your bedroom and upload it and people would find it.
I mean, it is quite funny that Napster and LimeWire and that would be the death of music, whereas now we have Spotify that pays everyone about 2p per stream.
No, that was not the death of music. Spotify was.
Yeah. Good old capitalism.
Can we ever go an episode without talking about?
No wonder we're so anti-capitalist, considering that we could pirate music so easily.
My local library had a CD section, and you could request CDs, and then you could borrow them for a week, and then you could burn the CD to a blank CD that you got from W.H. Smith on your own computer, print out album covers for them so it looked like a real CD and everything. And then you just return it to the library being like, thanks guys.
There was a boy at my school and he was like a bronger, if you remember those weird terms. He had like a band and stuff.
Oh,
and
wow.
he used to make these CDs and he used to make covers and stuff for them. I've still got like 6 of them because he made such legit copies of these albums.
Jen, can you please send us a picture afterwards if you can find them?
I'll try and find one. I think they're packed away, but I'll try and find one. He made me like The Clash, London Calling, Iggy Pop, Search and Destroy. It was, I don't think we do it so much now, but like your friends would get you into like stuff like, oh, I like this, I'll burn it for you.
Yeah.
Okay, that is everything for today's nostalgia trip. As you could see, we all had lots of different memories of the noughties. Perhaps you can tweet us some of yours, and I'll let B do a quick little sum up.
Yeah, so the noughties, perhaps not as rose-tinted as a lot of people sort of engaging in nostalgia towards them might remember. There was a lot of weird and unpleasant stuff that happened in them. There was a lot of very unhinged celebrity culture moments, but at the same time there was also a lot of really good stuff happening in pop culture. There was a lot of really great music. I think anyone growing up in the noughties would agree that the noughties produced some of the greatest music of all time, and some excellent pop culture moments in terms of movies, games, and some TV shows, not all TV shows. It was an era of unimaginably rapid technological advancement to the point where things happened that you couldn't imagine happening even 5 or 6 years ago. And the only thing that remains to be said is that for any people who grew up in the noughties who are listening, you've just lost the game.
Oh, for God's sake.
Oh, God.
Yeah, and on to Jess, who is going to talk about our socials.
If you haven't done so already, please follow us at Oomf on Twitter and get in touch with us. Comment on our tweets or even DM us if you so wish. We'd love to hear from you. Feedback, comments, suggestions for future episodes even, or what your memories of the noughties were. We also have YouTube and SoundCloud if you'd like to follow us on there too. And speaking of YouTube, we recently surpassed 500 views. So
Yay!
Thank you all for listening to us. We really do appreciate it. And Mimi is going to go ahead and tell us what the next episode is about.
So, as everybody knows, we all have one very common fandom in common. That sounded strange. It's obviously K-pop, more specifically BTS. So next episode is going to be about BTS. And I'm just going to leave it like that and leave it to your imagination.
I'm Jen and I was your host today. We have been Jess, B and Mimi, and we hope that you have enjoyed this nostalgia train with us.